Cold wind howled through the cracked window panes of the rusted Jeep Cherokee as August gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles stark white against the worn leather. In the passenger seat, his 7-year-old daughter shivered beneath a thin wool blanket, her breath pluming in the freezing air. Just 48 hours ago, his siblings had laughed in his face, clutching their multi-million-dollar trust funds while he walked away with the deed to a supposedly worthless $5 cabin in the unforgiving Montana wilderness. They thought they had won. They thought they had finally buried him. But what waited for August beneath the rotting floorboards of that forgotten mountain house would change their lives forever, unearthing a family secret so massive, it would bring his arrogant brother and sister crawling back on their knees. August Price sat rigidly in the plush, high-backed leather chair of the Seattle law firm, Hayes and Abernathy. The mahogany conference table gleamed under the warm, recessed lighting, reflecting the faces of the people he despised most in the world. To his left sat his older brother, Richard, checking a silver Rolex watch every 3 minutes, his tailored Armani suit a stark contrast to August's faded flannel and work-worn denim. To his right was his younger sister, Chloe, tapping her perfectly manicured acrylic nails against the screen of her phone, ignoring the gravity of the room. At the head of the table sat Benjamin Hayes, an aging estate lawyer with a sympathetic droop in his eyes. He was there to read the last will and testament of their father, William Price, a ruthless titan of commercial real estate who had amassed a fortune of over $40 million. August hadn't spoken to his father in 5 years. Not since William refused to lend August a single dime to help pay for the experimental leukemia treatments that could have saved August's wife, Sarah. William had called the treatments a bad investment. Sarah had passed away 6 months later, leaving August a grieving widower with a mountain of medical debt and a 2-year-old daughter, Lily, to raise alone. August had survived by taking grueling double shifts at a Spokane lumber yard, scraping by on clearance aisle groceries and sheer willpower. "Let's get this over with, Ben," Richard sighed, adjusting his silk tie. "The market's open in an hour, and I have a board meeting to prep for. We all know how this is going to play out. Mr. Hayes cleared his throat, adjusting his reading glasses. "Very well. I will skip the standard legalese and move to the distribution of assets. To my eldest son, Richard Price, I leave the entirety of Price Enterprises, including the commercial properties in downtown Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver." Richard smirked, a triumphant gleam in his eye. He didn't even look at August. "To my daughter, Chloe Price," the lawyer continued, "I leave the liquid assets held in the offshore accounts, the primary residence in Mercer Island, and the summer estate in the Hamptons." Chloe let out a dramatic sigh of relief. "Oh, thank God. I was terrified he was going to donate the Hamptons house to some wretched charity." August swallowed hard, his hands resting on his knees. He didn't expect millions. He knew his father resented him for choosing a blue-collar life, for marrying a school teacher instead of a socialite, but he hoped, just for Lily's sake, that his father had left enough to clear the crippling medical debt that kept them one missed paycheck away from eviction. Mr. Hayes paused, looking up from the heavy parchment paper. He met August's gaze, and for a fleeting second, August saw profound pity in the older man's eyes. "And to my youngest son, August Price," Hayes read, his voice dropping an octave. "I leave the deed to the property located on parcel 409 inches, the Bitterroot Mountains of Ravalli County, Montana. A property acquired in a foreclosure in 1998, assessed at a current tax value of $5. The room fell dead silent. Then, a sharp, cruel bark of laughter erupted from Richard. $5? Richard gasped, slapping the mahogany table. "He left you a $5 shack? Oh, August. That is poetic. That is truly poetic." Chloe giggled behind her hand. "Honestly, Artie, what are you going to do with that? Start a squirrel sanctuary? You can barely afford to put gas in that ancient truck of yours." August's face burned. He stared at the lawyer, hoping there was a mistake. "A $5 property? Mr. Hayes, I don't understand. Why would he even keep a property worth $5? It's an unpermitted, abandoned hunting cabin," Hayes explained softly, sliding a yellowed manila envelope across the table. "It has no running water, no connection to the electrical grid, and the land itself is practically vertical. The county assessed it at $5 simply because the cost to demolish it exceeds the value of the dirt it sits on. I am sorry, August." "Don't be," Richard sneered, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "Father always said August had a talent for building things from scratch. Now he's got a piece of rotting wood in the middle of nowhere to practice on. Enjoy the wilderness, little brother." Chloe picked up her designer handbag. If you need a loan for a tent, August, let my assistant know. But don't expect a handout. Father's final wishes were very clear. As his siblings swept out of the room, leaving behind the scent of expensive cologne and arrogance, August sat frozen. The envelope sat in front of him. Inside was the deed, a rusty brass key, and a small, handwritten note on his father's stationery. August opened the note. It read simply, "You always thought you were a survivor, August. Let's see if you can survive the truth." 3 days later, August's landlord in Spokane issued a final eviction notice. With his bank account overdrawn and nowhere else to go, August had no choice. He packed everything he and Lily owned into the back of his failing Jeep, strapped his daughter into her booster seat, and drove east toward the unforgiving peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains. He was going to claim his $5 inheritance. The drive into Ravalli County was a grueling ascent into nature's hostility. The paved highway gave way to gravel, which eventually devolved into a treacherous, deeply rutted logging road that hadn't seen maintenance in a decade. The November air was brutally cold, threatening the first major snowstorm of the season. "Daddy, are we almost there?" Lily asked from the back seat, her voice trembling slightly. She was bundled in 3 layers of sweaters, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. "Almost, sweetheart," August lied gently, gripping the steering wheel as the Jeep's tires spun over a patch of slick mud. "It's an adventure. Like camping. I don't like camping in the cold," she whispered. August's heart ached. He was failing her. His father had won from beyond the grave, humiliating him one final time by forcing him into this desperate corner. After 2 hours of navigating hairpin turns and steep inclines, the dense canopy of ponderosa pines broke, revealing a small, jagged clearing. At the center of it stood the inheritance. August threw the Jeep into park and stared through the windshield. It was worse than he had imagined. The cabin was a single-story structure made of rough-hewn logs that had turned gray with rot. Half of the cedar shingles on the roof were missing, leaving exposed water-damaged plywood. The front porch sagged under its own weight, the support beams eaten away by termites and time. Nature was actively reclaiming the building, creeping vines choked the windows, and a massive pine tree had fallen decades ago, crushing a section of the back wall. It wasn't a home. It was a death trap. "We're gonna stay here?" Lily asked, her wide eyes staring at the creepy, dilapidated structure. "Just for a little while, Lilybug," August said, forcing a brave smile, "until Daddy figures things out." "Come on, let's go inside. We need to get a fire going." Stepping onto the porch, the wood groaned ominously under August's boots. He slid the rusty brass key into the front door. The lock didn't even turn, the door was already broken, the strike plate completely rusted through. He pushed it open, stepping into a cloud of dust and the overpowering stench of mildew and animal droppings. The interior was a single, large room. A stone fireplace dominated the far wall, choked with decades of debris. The furniture consisted of a collapsed cot, a heavy oak dining table that looked suspiciously out of place in the squalor, and a rusted cast iron wood stove in the kitchen area. Survival instincts, honed from years of hunting and camping in his youth, immediately kicked in. The temperature was dropping fast. It would be below freezing by nightfall. "Okay, Lily, your job is to stay right here by the door. Don't wander," August instructed, tossing his heavy duffel bag onto the floor. For the next 4 hours, August worked with frantic, desperate energy. He used a heavy-duty tarp and a staple gun from his truck to seal the shattered windows. He cleared the dead birds and leaves from the chimney flue, praying the masonry was still structurally sound. He took an axe to the fallen pine tree out back, chopping enough damp wood to get them through the night, using pages from a phone book and a bottle of lighter fluid to coax a stubborn, smoky fire to life in the hearth. By the time the sun dipped behind the jagged mountain peaks, casting long, eerie shadows across the clearing, the cabin was marginally warmer. August heated up a can of baked beans on a portable camping stove, and the two of them ate in the flickering orange glow of the fire. "It's like a pioneer house," Lily said, trying to be brave as she ate her beans. "Exactly like a pioneer house," August said, wrapping a thick sleeping bag around her shoulders. But as Lily fell asleep, the reality of their situation crashed down on August. The wind began to howl, a vicious, shrieking sound that rattled the rotting walls. Sleet began to pellet the roof, and within minutes, a steady drip of freezing water began to leak through the ceiling, splashing onto the floorboards just a few feet from where Lily slept. August moved a plastic bucket to catch the water. Listening to the hollow plink, plink, plink in the dark. He sat by the fire, exhausted to his bones, holding a tire iron across his lap in case a bear or a coyote decided to investigate the scent of their food. Why did his father do this? William Price was a cruel man, but he was also a calculating one. Leaving a $5 cabin to his destitute son felt too petty, even for him. And what did the note mean? Let's see if you can survive the truth. The next 3 days were a brutal test of endurance. A heavy snowstorm trapped them on the mountain. August spent his daylight hours patching the roof with scavenged tin and tarps, rationing their meager food supply of canned goods and dry pasta. He melted snow for drinking water. Every muscle in his body ached, and a deep, gnawing fear began to take root in his stomach. If they got sick, or if the truck wouldn't start when the snow cleared, they would die up here. Richard and Chloe would never even know, and if they did, they probably wouldn't care. On the fourth morning, the storm broke, leaving 3 feet of pristine, blindingly white snow across the mountain. They were thoroughly snowed in. August needed more firewood, but the fallen pine outside was frozen solid and buried. He looked around the cabin for anything he could burn, the broken cot, the baseboards. Then, his eyes fell on a heavy wooden door near the kitchen area that he had previously assumed was a pantry, but it was nailed shut. August grabbed his crowbar. With a grunt of effort, he pried the rusty nails free, splintering the ancient wood. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow, steep staircase leading down into utter darkness. A cellar. The air wafting up was surprisingly dry, carrying a faint, unnatural scent, not just dirt, but something chemical, like machine oil and ozone. "Lily, stay by the fire," August commanded, grabbing a heavy-duty flashlight from his bag. He descended the stairs cautiously, the wooden treads groaning under his weight. At the bottom, the beam of his flashlight cut through the gloom. It was a standard, poured concrete root cellar, roughly 20 feet across. Empty mason jars lined rotting wooden shelves. In the center of the room sat a massive, industrial-sized cast iron boiler, clearly defunct, covered in a thick layer of rust. August sighed. Nothing to burn down here. He walked over to the wooden shelves, intending to break them down for kindling. But as he grabbed a shelf to rip it from the wall, his boot caught the edge of a heavy rubber mat lying flush against the base of the boiler. He stumbled, dropping the flashlight. As it hit the concrete floor, it emitted a hollow, echoing thud. August froze. He stamped his boot on the concrete. Thud. Thud. Solid. He moved over to the rubber mat and stamped on it. Clang. Clang. Hollow. Metal. His heart rate spiked. He dropped to his knees, gripping the edge of the filthy rubber mat, and heaved it backward in a cloud of dust. Beneath the mat was not a concrete floor. It was a pristine, brushed steel trapdoor, perfectly flush with the ground. In the center of the steel plate was a highly sophisticated, modern digital keypad with a biometric thumb scanner glowing with a faint, pulsing red LED light. It looked like something out of a military installation. Utterly alien in this rotting, century-old cabin. August's breath hitched. Let's see if you can survive the truth. August stared at the glowing red keypad, his mind racing. This cabin had supposedly been abandoned since 1998. It had no power line, no solar panels, no generator that he could hear. Yet this lock was active, drawing power from some hidden, subterranean source. He wiped the dirt from the keypad with his thumb. A small LCD screen flickered to life, displaying a single word: access. He had no code. He had no fingerprint registered in whatever database this machine was connected to. Frustration boiled over into anger. He grabbed his crowbar from the stairs and jammed it into the microscopic seam between the steel door and the concrete frame, throwing his entire weight onto the steel bar. The crowbar bent. The trapdoor didn't yield a millimeter. It was bank vault grade steel. Panting, August sat back on his heels. He thought back to the lawyer's office, the reading of the will, the sneers from Richard and Chloe, and then the envelope. He scrambled up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. Lily was sitting by the fire, drawing in a coloring book. August dug frantically through his duffel bag until he found the yellowed manila envelope. Mr. Hayes had given him. He pulled out the deed, the useless brass key, and the note from his father. You always thought you were a survivor, August. Let's see if you can survive the truth. He turned the note over. Nothing. He held it up to the light of the fire. Nothing. He examined the brass key. It was old, tarnished, completely standard. Then he looked at the deed itself It was a standard Ravalli County property deed, but in the bottom right corner, next to his father's sweeping, aggressive signature, was a string of handwritten numbers. August had assumed it was a parcel number or a notary code, EE Ling C, E Jo Balu Ling T. August's blood ran cold. He recognized those numbers. It wasn't a random code. It was a date, the 4th of November 1986, and the 07 at the end. The 4th of November 1986 was the day August's mother, Evelyn, had died in a tragic, unsolved hit-and-run accident when August was 7 years old. The 07 was his age. His father had never spoken of her death, forbidding the children from ever mentioning her name in the house. August grabbed the deed and practically ran back down to the cellar. He knelt before the glowing keypad. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely isolate his index finger. He punched in the numbers. 110-4198607. He pressed the pound key. The red light on the keypad held steady for 3 agonizing seconds. Then, it flashed green. A deep mechanical clunk reverberated through the concrete floor, followed by the hiss of depressurizing hydraulics. The heavy steel trapdoor slowly swung upward on its own, revealing a spiral staircase made of reinforced steel grating, descending down into a brightly lit corridor. Warm, climate-controlled air wafted up, carrying the smell of sterilized electronics and paper. August clicked off his flashlight. The staircase was illuminated by motion sensor LED strips. "Lily," August called up the stairs, his voice hoarse. "Stay exactly where you are. Daddy will be right back." He gripped the crowbar tightly in his right hand and began his descent. The spiral staircase went down at least 30 feet. Far below the frost line, far below the rotting foundations of the cabin above. When his boots hit the floor at the bottom, he found himself standing in a short hallway lined with concrete that looked freshly poured. At the end of the hall was an open vault door, 2 feet thick, identical to what one would find in a Federal Reserve branch. August stepped through the vault door. The room beyond took his breath away. It was massive, easily the size of a basketball court, entirely buried beneath the mountain. The room was divided into 3 distinct sections. To his left were rows of heavy-duty metal shelving. To his right, a sprawling executive desk setup with computer servers humming quietly in climate-controlled glass cabinets. And in the center, resting on reinforced pallets, were neatly stacked rows of dull, yellow bricks. August walked toward the center of the room, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. He approached the nearest pallet. He reached out and touched one of the bricks. It was freezing cold, incredibly heavy, and stamped with the insignia of a Swiss refinery. Gold bullion. Hundreds of bars. Thousands. August staggered backward, bumping into the metal shelving. He turned and saw what was on the shelves. They weren't just storing more gold. They were storing art. Framed paintings wrapped in protective museum-grade plastic. He recognized the style of one immediately, a vibrant, swirling post-impressionist landscape. Beside it, a small bronze sculpture. Items that belonged in the Louvre or the Met, hidden away in a subterranean bunker in Montana. This wasn't an inheritance. This was a dragon's hoard. This was a 50-year accumulation of untold, untraceable wealth. But why hide it? Why leave the legal, clean $40 million empire to Richard and Chloe, and leave this hidden, multi-billion-dollar treasure trove to the disgraced, exiled son? August moved to the executive desk. On top of the mahogany surface sat a single, thick, leather-bound ledger, and next to it, a modern laptop computer, already powered on. Resting on the keyboard was an envelope with August's name on it. He set the crowbar down, his hands trembling as he opened the envelope. Inside was a multi-page letter, typed, dated 2 weeks before his father's death. August, if you are reading this, it means you didn't sell the property for scrap, and you didn't freeze to death. You proved you are the only one of my children with a spine. Richard is a parasite. Chloe is a fool. They spent their lives kissing my ring, waiting for me to die so they could feast on my empire. What they don't know, and what the federal government is about to find out, is that the empire I left them is built entirely on a house of cards. For 40 years, Price Enterprises has been a massive money laundering front for an international cartel. The commercial properties Richard inherited, over-leveraged, riddled with toxic debt, and the primary focus of an ongoing, sealed federal RICO indictment. The offshore accounts Chloe inherited, frozen by Interpol as of yesterday. Within 72 hours of my death, the FBI, the IRS, and the SEC will descend on your brother and sister. They will lose everything. Their homes, their freedom, their reputations. They will go to federal prison for crimes they didn't even know they were complicit in. I engineered it that way. I wanted to see them fall. But you, August, you walked away. You chose that sickly wife of yours over the family business. I hated you for it, but I also respected it. You are clean. The asset forfeiture will not touch you. The $5 cabin is legally yours, free and clear, and everything beneath it is untraceable. There is over $200 million in cartel gold, stolen antiquities, and untraceable bearer bonds in this room. I stole it from the worst people on earth, and I buried it here. Consider this your true inheritance, a new life for you and my granddaughter. But be warned, August, the people I took this from are not forgiving. The vault is secure, but you must be smart. Read the ledger, learn the accounts, disappear. Your father, William Price. August stared at the letter, the blood roaring in his ears. His father hadn't just given him a fortune. He had given him a cursed treasure, and in the same breath, he had completely destroyed Richard and Chloe. The $5 shack was a lifeboat. The millions his siblings inherited was a sinking ship strapped with dynamite. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing sound echoed down from the spiral staircase. It was Lily. She was screaming, "Daddy! Daddy, there's a man!" August dropped the letter, snatched the crowbar from the desk, and sprinted toward the stairs, the massive steel vault door looming behind him. The real survival hadn't even begun. Adrenaline surged through August's veins like ice water as he practically flew up the reinforced steel spiral staircase. His boots clanged against the grating, every echoing step masking the sound of whatever was happening in the cabin above. His grip on the heavy iron crowbar was so tight his knuckles ached. He had survived poverty, grief, and the cruelty of his own flesh and blood, but he would not let anything happen to his daughter. August burst through the trapdoor, scrambling onto the concrete floor of the cellar. He lunged up the wooden stairs and kicked the cellar door wide open, stepping into the dim, smoky light of the cabin. Lily was backed into the far corner of the room, shivering violently, her small hands covering her mouth to stifle her sobs. Standing in the center of the room, tracking snow onto the rotting floorboards, was a massive man in a heavy, fur-lined parka. In his thick, gloved hands, he held a 1-2 gauge pump-action shotgun, casually pointed at the floor. He wasn't a cartel hitman. He wore a tan Stetson hat and a dark green uniform beneath his coat. A silver star was pinned to his chest. "Take it easy there, buddy," the man said, his voice a low, gravelly drawl. He raised his free hand in a placating gesture, though his eyes were cold and calculating. "Put the tire iron down. I'm Deputy Travis Boyd, Ravalli County Sheriff's Department. Saw the smoke from your chimney? This road's been closed for 5 years. You're trespassing." August didn't lower the crowbar. He stepped laterally, placing himself directly between the deputy and his daughter. "We aren't trespassing. My name is August Price. I own this property. My father, William Price, left it to me in his will." Deputy Boyd's eyes flicked to the open cellar door, then back to August. A slow, greasy smile spread across his wind-chapped face. "Price, huh?" Boyd chuckled, resting the butt of the shotgun against his hip. "Well, I'll be damned," the old man finally croaked. Rumor around the station was always that old William had a stash spot up here. He used to drive up in a black SUV twice a year, stay for an hour, and leave. Never hunted, never fished, just sat in a rotted cabin. Boyd took a heavy step forward. The floorboards groaned. "I came up here looking to salvage some copper wire. Maybe a generator," Boyd continued, his gaze drifting back to the cellar. "But, judging by the fact that you just popped out of a hole in the ground looking like you saw a ghost, I'm guessing William left something a little more valuable than scrap metal. Am I right, August?" "It's just an empty root cellar," August lied, his voice steady despite the hammer pounding of his heart. "Empty jars. Mildew. We were just looking for firewood. Don't insult my intelligence," Boyd sneered. He racked the shotgun. The sharp clack-clack echoed like a thunderclap in the small room. Lily whimpered. "Now, you're going to drop that metal bar, and you and the little girl are going to sit nice and quiet by the fire. I'm going to take a walk down those stairs. If I like what I see, maybe I leave you two enough gas to get back to Spokane." August calculated the distance. 10 feet. Too far to lunge before Boyd could pull the trigger. "Okay," August said, his voice dropping in defeat. He slowly lowered the crowbar toward the floor. Okay, you win. There's a safe down there. Old coins. Take whatever you want, just don't hurt her. Boyd scoffed, his eyes filled with greed as he stepped past August, his attention entirely focused on the dark maw of the cellar. Old coins? I think old William was holding out on. As Boyd's boot hit the first wooden stair, August didn't drop the crowbar. He swung it upward with every ounce of terrifying, desperate strength he possessed. The heavy iron bar connected squarely with the deputy's right kneecap. A sickening crack filled the air, followed instantly by a roar of agony. Boyd's leg buckled instantly, sending him crashing onto the wooden staircase. The shotgun fired wildly into the ceiling, blowing a hole through the rotted shingles and showering them in freezing snow and splinters. August didn't hesitate. Before Boyd could recover and pump another shell into the chamber, August leaped onto the man's back. He pinned Boyd's right arm beneath his knee and brought the crowbar down hard across the deputy's wrist. Boyd screamed again, releasing the weapon. August kicked the shotgun across the room, out of reach. The two men grappled in the tight space of the cellar stairwell. Boyd was heavier, throwing wild, desperate punches that clipped August's jaw, tasting of copper and dirt. But August was fighting for his child's life. He grabbed a heavy glass mason jar from the top shelf of the cellar and smashed it directly against the side of Boyd's head. The deputy went limp, slumping heavily against the wooden stairs. August sat back, gasping for air, his chest heaving. Silence rushed back into the cabin, save for the howling wind through the new hole in the roof, and Lily's quiet, terrified crying. "Daddy?" she whispered. "I'm here, Lilybug. I'm right here," August rasped, scrambling to his feet. He ran to his daughter, scooping her up into a fierce hug. "He's asleep. The bad man is just asleep. You're safe." But August knew they weren't safe. He dragged Boyd's unconscious, heavy body up from the stairwell and used heavy-duty zip ties from his toolkit to bind the man's wrists and ankles to the cast iron leg of the wood stove. The local police knew about this place. If Boyd was up here snooping, others might follow. August had to secure the perimeter, and he had to understand exactly what kind of war his father had drafted him into. He looked at the open cellar door, then down at his shivering daughter. "Come on, Lily. We're going downstairs. It's warm down there. It's safe." August carried Lily down the spiral staircase, leaving the freezing, dilapidated cabin behind. The moment they stepped past the massive steel vault door, the climate control washed over them. A luxurious 72 degrees. Lily's eyes went wide as she took in the gleaming servers, the bright LED lights, and the stacks of gold bars. "Is this a secret base?" she asked, her fear momentarily eclipsed by childish wonder. "Yeah, sweetie. It's a secret base," August said softly. He found a plush leather executive chair behind the mahogany desk and gently set her down in it. He handed her a protein bar from his bag. "Eat this. I need to do some computer work." August sat down at the laptop his father had left running. The screen was a dashboard of complex security feeds and financial software. 4 exterior cameras, disguised perfectly in the trees outside, showed the snowy clearing, the rusted Jeep, and the unbroken blanket of white covering the mountain road. He clicked open a web browser. The laptop was connected to the internet via an encrypted satellite uplink. August typed Price Enterprises into the search bar. He didn't have to look far. It was the top trending news story across every major financial and national news outlet. FBI raids Price Enterprises, headquarters, billionaire heirs indicted in sweeping RICO case. August clicked on a live news feed from a Seattle station. The screen buffered for a second before showing footage of heavily armed federal agents carrying boxes of documents out of the sleek, glass-fronted Price skyscraper downtown. The news anchor's voice was grim. "Breaking news this morning. Just 1 week after the passing of real estate magnate William Price, his empire has crumbled. The FBI, operating on an anonymous tip containing thousands of pages of encrypted ledgers, executed a dawn raid on Price Enterprises. The company is accused of operating a 4-decade-long money laundering scheme for the notorious Navarro cartel out of Mexico." The footage cut to a chaotic scene outside a luxury penthouse in downtown Seattle. 2 federal agents were shoving a handcuffed man into the back of a black SUV. It was Richard. His custom Armani suit was rumpled, his face pale and contorted in pure panic. He was screaming at the cameras, completely unhinged. "I didn't know! It was my father! I just inherited it!" Richard yelled before an agent forced his head down into the vehicle. The broadcast continued. Interpol has also frozen all offshore assets linked to the Price family. The youngest daughter, Chloe Price, was taken into custody at her Hamptons estate early this morning on charges of wire fraud and tax evasion. Authorities state that the inherited wealth was entirely built on illicit funds, rendering the siblings completely bankrupt. August stared at the screen, a chilling mixture of horror and awe washing over him. His father hadn't just cut them out of the will. He had handed them a ticking time bomb. William Price had used his final days to upload the evidence of his own crimes to the federal government, timing the release perfectly so that the moment Richard and Chloe took legal ownership of the company, the trap sprang shut. He had orchestrated their total, absolute destruction from beyond the grave. August looked around the subterranean vault. "You are clean," his father's letter had read. "The $5 cabin is legally yours, and everything beneath it is untraceable." William had given August the real wealth, the physical assets, the gold, the art, the bearer bonds. He had rewarded the son who walked away and punished the ones who stayed out of greed. But as August scrolled through his father's encrypted ledger, his sense of victory evaporated. The ledger detailed the exact amounts stored in the vault: $240 million in Swiss gold bullion, $85 million in stolen antiquities, and $50 million in bearer bonds. But the last entry in the ledger, dated the day before his father died, was a warning. The Navarro cartel knows the funds are missing from the primary accounts. They do not know about the Rivali County property. "I have wiped all coordinates from the company mainframes. As long as Richard doesn't speak to them, you are a ghost." August felt a cold sweat break out on the back of his neck. He switched tabs, pulling up his father's hacked database of Richard's phone records, which the old man had clearly been monitoring. August looked at the call logs from 2 days ago, the day of the will reading. Just hours after mocking August for inheriting the $5 cabin, Richard had received a phone call from an untraceable Mexican number. The call lasted 4 minutes. Immediately after that call, Richard had accessed the county tax database. He had looked up the GPS coordinates for parcel 409 inches, the Bitterroot Mountains. August's stomach plummeted. Richard wasn't just arrogant, he was a coward. The moment the cartel called him, demanding their missing laundered money, Richard had panicked. Knowing his father had left August a random, worthless piece of land in the middle of nowhere, Richard must have realized it was a stash house. He had sold August out to save his own skin. He had given the Navarro cartel the coordinates to the cabin. August frantically clicked back to the security camera feeds. The snowstorm had finally stopped. The sky was turning a crisp, clear blue. The road up the mountain was buried under 3 feet of snow, impassable for any normal vehicle. But on camera 3, pointing down the winding logging road, August saw movement. It wasn't a normal vehicle. Half a mile down the mountain, plowing through the deep snow with brutal efficiency, were 2 matte black, heavily armored tracked vehicles, snowcats. They were moving steadily toward the clearing. August zoomed in on the lead snowcat. Standing in the open hatch of the roof was a man wearing tactical winter gear, holding a high-powered assault rifle. The cartel wasn't coming. They were already here. August had less than 10 minutes before a team of heavily armed mercenaries breached the cabin above. He looked at the 2-foot-thick steel vault door, then at his 7-year-old daughter, who was happily munching on her protein bar, oblivious to the army rolling up the mountain to kill them. He couldn't fight an army with a crowbar, but he was standing in the command center of a billionaire's paranoid fortress. He had to figure out how to turn his father's tomb into a weapon. August spun away from the monitors and began tearing through the mahogany executive desk. His father was a paranoid calculating mastermind. He wouldn't build a subterranean fortress to hoard hundreds of millions of dollars without installing a way to defend it or escape it. Drawers flew open, scattering encrypted flash drives, leather-bound notebooks, and satellite phone chargers. In the bottom right drawer, underneath a false bottom, August found what he was looking for: a heavy black Pelican case and a rolled-up set of architectural blueprints. He unrolled the blueprints across the desk, weighing the corners down with solid gold bars. The schematics detailed the entire underground facility: the main vault, the climate control systems, the reinforced steel structure. But August's eyes traced a faint, dotted blue line leading away from the rear of the vault, sloping upward through the bedrock. It was labeled Secondary Egress Ventilation. It led to a concealed exit nearly 500 yards away, terminating in a rocky ravine, completely invisible from the main logging road. "Lily," August said, his voice completely calm, devoid of the sheer terror vibrating in his chest. "I need you to put your heavy coat back on, sweetheart. Fast as you can." "Are we leaving the secret base?" she asked, her bottom lip trembling as she wrestled her arms into her puffy pink winter coat. We're going to take a secret tunnel, August said, popping the latches on the black Pelican case. Inside the case lay the ultimate testament to William Price's ruthlessness. It was a tactical, custom-built demolition control panel, a digital interface with 3 heavy, toggle switch safeties, and a red ignition button. A laminated card taped to the inside of the lid read, Surface Denial Protocol. Anfo, C4 Array. August's stomach dropped. The entire foundation of the cabin above, the poured concrete of the upper root cellar, and the earth surrounding the trapdoor were wired with military-grade explosives. His father had built a self-destruct mechanism to ensure that if the FBI or the cartel ever breached the property, they would be vaporized, and the vault below would be permanently sealed under thousands of tons of collapsed mountain rock. August looked at the security monitors. The snowcats had reached the clearing. 7 men piled out of the vehicles. They were dressed in high-end, white winter camouflage, carrying suppressed automatic rifles. They moved with terrifying, practiced efficiency, fanning out to secure the perimeter. The leader, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a scarred jawline and a dark tactical vest, gestured silently toward the cabin. On the camera feed from inside the cabin, August watched the front door get kicked off its rotting hinges. 4 mercenaries flooded the room, rifles raised. They immediately found Deputy Boyd, still unconscious and zip-tied to the cast-iron wood stove. The leader walked into the frame. He grabbed a fistful of snow from the broken roof and shoved it into Boyd's face. The deputy jerked awake, eyes wide with panic, thrashing against the heavy zip ties. August couldn't hear what they were saying. The interior cameras lacked audio, but the body language was clear. The leader was asking questions. Boyd, sobbing and terrified, nodded furiously and jerked his head toward the open cellar door. The leader stood up, casually drew a suppressed pistol from his hip, and shot the deputy. August instinctively covered Lily's eyes, though she couldn't see the monitors from where she stood. Don't look at the screens, baby. Look at me. Just look at me. He watched the screen as the mercenaries descended the wooden stairs into the upper cellar. They crowded around the massive steel trapdoor, pointing their flashlights at the glowing green biometric keypad. The leader tapped his radio, speaking into the mic. A moment later, the rear door of the second snowcat opened. 2 mercenaries dragged a figure out into the freezing snow. The man was handcuffed, wearing only a torn, designer dress shirt and slacks, shivering so violently he could barely stand. His face was bruised and bleeding. It was Richard. August's breath hitched. The cartel hadn't just gotten the coordinates from his brother. They had brought him along as a hostage to ensure he wasn't leading them into a federal ambush. They dragged Richard inside the cabin and shoved him down the cellar stairs. The mercenary leader pointed his pistol directly at Richard's head, then pointed at the heavy steel trapdoor. He was demanding Richard open it. Suddenly, the intercom speaker on the mahogany desk in the vault crackled to life. August! Richard's voice screamed through the speaker, raw and frantic. August, I know you're down there. The deputy's cruiser is parked a mile down the road. They know someone is here. Open the door, Artie. For God's sake, they're gonna kill me. August stood frozen. His hand hovered over the microphone button on the console. August, please! Richard sobbed, his voice echoing off the concrete walls of the vault. They took everything! The feds took the company, they froze the accounts. The cartel intercepted me at the airfield. I gave them the coordinates. I had to. They were going to kill me. Just open the vault and let them take the money, Artie. We can figure this out. August pressed the microphone button. You sold me out, Richard, he said, his voice cold and steady, echoing up through the intercom into the cellar above. You handed them the coordinates to my home. You handed them my daughter. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Then, the mercenary leader's voice came through, thick with a dark, threatening amusement. Well. The exiled son, the leader said. Listen to me very carefully, August. You have $200 million of my employer's money sitting in that hole. You are going to open this door, and you are going to walk up those stairs. If you do, I let you and the kid walk down the mountain. If you don't, I have 50 pounds of thermite in the snowcat. I will melt this vault door into slag, and I will burn you and your daughter alive inside that tomb. You have 60 seconds. August looked at the vault door. 2 feet of steel. Thermite would cut through it in less than 10 minutes. The ventilation system would suck the toxic smoke directly into the room. They would suffocate long before the cartel even breached the room. He had no choice. He looked at the Black Pelican case. Daddy? Lily whispered, tugging on his flannel sleeve. Who is yelling? Just some bad men who are about to leave, August said. He unzipped his heavy canvas duffel bag. He ran to the nearest pallet of gold and shoved 6 of the heavy Swiss bullion bars into the bag, nearly $3 million worth of gold. It was heavy, but he could carry it. He grabbed a thick stack of untraceable bearer bonds and shoved them into his coat pocket. He didn't need 200 million, he just needed enough to vanish. August, 30 seconds, the mercenary yelled through the intercom. I'm setting the charges! Richard, August spoke into the microphone one last time. I hope the millions were worth it. Goodbye. Already know. No, wait. August flipped the 3 heavy toggle switches on the Pelican case. Warning lights flashed yellow, then solid red. He pressed his thumb against the ignition button and held it down. A deep, mechanical alarm began to blare throughout the vault. A rhythmic, pulsing klaxon. The digital countdown on the case started at 60 seconds. Wushajo, Wushaba, Wushitsi. Come on, Lily! Run! August grabbed his duffel bag, hoisted it onto his shoulder, and grabbed his daughter's hand. They sprinted past the servers, past the priceless paintings, and past the towering pallets of gold that had destroyed his family. At the far end of the vault, behind a heavy metal shelving unit, August found the secondary egress door. It was a heavy, circular bulkhead, like a submarine hatch. He spun the wheel. It shrieked in protest, the rusted gears grinding, but it gave way. He pulled the heavy steel door open, revealing a dark, narrow concrete tunnel sloping upward into the bedrock. Sishawu, Sishisan. He pushed Lily inside and clicked on his heavy-duty flashlight. Keep moving, sweetie! Don't stop until I tell you to! August climbed in after her, pulling the heavy bulkhead door shut and spinning the interior locking wheel. They were sealed in the escape shaft. They scrambled up the steep concrete incline. The air in the tunnel was stale and frigid, smelling of damp earth and old concrete. August's lungs burned as he pushed the heavy duffel bag ahead of him, his boots slipping on the dusty floor. Arshur, Shijo, Shaba. Back in the upper cellar, the mercenaries were frantically wiring the thermite charges to the vault door. Richard was weeping, slumped against the wooden stairs. Through the thick steel floor, the muffled sound of the mechanical alarm from the vault below suddenly stopped. A profound, terrifying silence fell over the mountain for a fraction of a second. Then, the world ended. August and Lily were 100 yards up the tunnel when the shockwave hit. The foundation of the cabin detonated with the force of a localized earthquake. A deafening, concussive roar ripped through the bedrock, throwing August violently forward. He landed hard over his daughter, shielding her with his body as the walls of the tunnel shook violently, raining dust and loose gravel down upon them. Above ground, the explosion was apocalyptic. The rotting wooden cabin was instantly vaporized in a massive, blinding fireball that lit up the twilight sky. The blast wave shattered the snowcats, flipping the heavily armored vehicles like children's toys and completely obliterating the mercenaries caught in the blast radius. The concrete upper cellar caved in instantly. Thousands of tons of dirt, splintered pine, and shattered rock collapsed downward, burying the steel trap door beneath an impenetrable mountain of debris. William Price's trap had worked flawlessly. The surface was denied. The vault, the cartel's millions, and Richard's greed were buried forever under the earth. In the tunnel, the violent shaking finally stopped. A thick cloud of concrete dust choked the air. August coughed violently, his ears ringing with a high-pitched whine. He pushed himself off the ground, shining the flashlight through the haze. Lily? Lily, are you hurt? He choked out, panic rising in his throat. She coughed, rubbing her eyes, her face streaked with dirt, but she sat up. I'm okay, Daddy, it was really loud. August let out a ragged sob of relief, pulling her tightly against his chest. I know, baby. I know. It's over now. The bad men are gone. They continued up the shaft for another 20 minutes, their progress slow and cautious. Finally, the tunnel leveled out, terminating at a heavy iron grate concealed within a natural rock fissure. August kicked the grate open, letting in a blast of freezing, fresh mountain air. They climbed out into the snow. They were high up on a ridge, looking down at the clearing half a mile below. Where the cabin had stood, there was now only a massive, smoking crater. The wreckage of the snowcats burned brightly in the deepening night, casting long, dancing shadows across the snow. August looked at the destruction. His brother was gone, the cartel's strike team was gone, his father's cursed legacy was buried in the dirt where it belonged. Next to the tunnel exit, hidden beneath a camouflage tarp, August found the final piece of his father's escape plan: a pair of modern, heavy-duty snowmobiles, fully winterized, with keys in the ignitions and extra fuel cans strapped to the back. August strapped the heavy duffel bag of gold and bonds to the cargo rack. He lifted Lily onto the seat in front of him, wrapping his coat around her to shield her from the wind. He turned the key. The engine roared to life, a beautiful, steady purr that cut through the silence of the mountain. August engaged the throttle, steering the machine away from the burning crater, disappearing into the dark, protective embrace of the wilderness. 6 months later, the blistering sun beat down on the turquoise waters of the Caribbean. August sat on the shaded deck of a modest, newly purchased beachfront home in Costa Rica, watching Lily build a massive sandcastle by the surf. They had new names, new passports, and a quiet, peaceful life. Back in the States, the Price name was a disgraced memory. Chloe remained in federal prison, her offshore wealth seized, while Richard was legally declared missing, presumed dead by authorities who found only the charred crater in Montana. The FBI never found the gold. The cartel never found the vault. They had all destroyed each other fighting over a poisoned empire, leaving the exiled son to walk away with the true prize. August took a sip of his coffee, feeling the warm ocean breeze on his face. His father had tried to curse him with a $5 inheritance, but in the end, that rotting cabin had bought them exactly what August had always wanted: freedom.